Supreme Family Chaos, creator Eliza Phoenix, Chapter 13, The Doctor is in. Summary: 5 times Stephen takes care of Tony and Peter, and 1 time they take care of him. Stephen fled from the tower the moment heavy metal music echoed through the surrounding floors of the lab. It wasn't that he hated the music, it was the fact that he knew exactly what it meant. Tony and Peter were blowing things up. He could meditate through a majority of things that went on in the tower, like if Clint and Sam took over the living room, play video games. Peter crawling over the ceiling, Tony cursing at something he's tinkering with on the coffee table, or Clint crawling through the air vent. Their floor was constantly taken over by the other Avengers, and he had grown used to it. But explosions from the lab was another thing entirely. It was random and had different levels of noise that startled Stephen's astral form back into his body and left him momentarily confused and disoriented. Not a fun feeling. Stephen sighs when Wong drops a stack of books on the table in front of him, and he opens a single eye. Do you mind? Wong ignores him as he sits down. AC/DC? The Sorcerer Supreme stretches out in his chair. Metallica. Wouldn't blasting music hurt Peter's ears? He's used to it. He's usually the one controlling the volume anyway. Stephen slumps in his chair. How's motherhood treating you? Stephen Strange groans. Not you too. How did you know? Tony calls you Mama Bear almost all the time. It was obvious. Wong flips through one of the books, and I heard Peter call you Mom. That boy will be the death of me. I thought I saw some more gray hairs. He wouldn't be surprised. Both Peter and Tony had very little consideration of self-preservation, to the point that, well, they were blowing things up in the lab. He could confidently bet that the eye of Agamotto that he would go home to at least one of them in need of first aid kit. Booze only helped them in emergency for how often they got themselves into trouble. He was tired of fishing glasses out of broken skin because of a stupid idea. I'm tempted to cover them in a bubble wrap so I can have a minute of peace without having to worry about what trouble they're getting into. Your domesticity is nauseating. Stephen smirks. You're just jealous. Hardly. Stephen's phones start ringing, and he looks at the screen and sighs before answering. Yes, Spiderling? Holy crap! Where are you? Dad got knocked out by the fire extinguisher. Stephen coughs to hide his laugh. He was definitely going to watch today's recording of the lab to see how that happened. I'll be there shortly. He hangs up before Peter can utter another word and glances at Wong. What's the damage this time? Stephen grins. Technical knockout by a fire extinguisher. Wong laughs. Peter, I swear. A Lego smacks painlessly against Stephen's forehead. Did you just throw a Lego at me? The teen flattens himself against the ceiling. That was my venom. I'm a spider. The Vishanti are testing me. Peter had just recently gotten all of his wisdom teeth pulled out and was on the verge of a strong painkiller side effect. Something Stephen prayed he would never have to give the boy again because he was a menace. Peter refused to stay in bed and had taken to the ceiling instead, leaving Stephen no choice but to follow him and try to coax him down. He hoped to whatever entity that was listening that the boy wouldn't fall and hurt himself. The first thing he tried was Livy, but Peter stubbornly clung onto the ceiling, so he had to wave the cloak off of him from that attempt. Bribing him with ice cream was a dead end as well. Spiderling, you don't spit venom. Then another idea came to mind, and Stephen didn't know why he didn't think of it before. How does a movie sound? Peter looks at the sorcerer and seems to think over his offer. Okay. Peter was a sucker for physical contact, no matter how high he was. Stephen sighs with relief when the teen moves down from the ceiling and immediately clings onto the older man's front like a baby. The sorcerer wraps his arm around Peter to hold him steady and makes his way back into the boy's bedroom where he gently deposits his burden. He murmurs to the boy to stay while he lives to change into something more comfortable, and thankfully returns to Peter's room a couple of minutes later to find the boy curled up in a blanket. Where's Dad? At an according meeting. He'll be back by dinner. Strange slips into bed next to Peter, and the teen wastes no time curling up against him. What do you want to watch, Spider Baby? Disney movie. Stephen has Karen, Tony connected to Peter's AI to his bedroom. Start a Disney movie. And gently strokes the brown curls. That didn't make sense. Okay. It didn't take long for Peter to pass out between the ministration and snuggling. One would think the boy was touch-starved. The tower was calm. Peter was at school and Tony was at a meeting, so Stephen felt he could relax. He really should have known better. As soon as he stretched out on the couch with an actual book not related to the mystic arts, Tony strode out of the elevator with blood streaming down his temple. The sorcerer sighs when his boyfriend flops down on the couch when he sits up, and he retrieves the first aid kit and some ice through a couple of small portals. I'd ask how your meeting went, but that would be pointless. Tony hisses when Stephen applies some antiseptic. The meeting was fine. The private meeting Ross wanted, not so much. Just say the word and I can have him free-falling for a couple of hours. That would be counterproductive since I'm trying to keep you and Peter out of the records. You are both special cases. The doctor finishes applying butterfly bandages and then hands Tony the ice. The engineer did have legitimate reasons for keeping Stephen and Peter away. Stephen was a sorcerer supreme and had responsibility to protect the world from magic attacks. Peter was simply underage. Head feeling better? Stephen asks softly. Tony nods and grimaces as he places the ice pack on his head. I think I'll leave. Scott slips into the living room and sits in an armchair with a juice pouch. Hey, Strange, your mama bear is showing. That better not be Peter's Capri Sun. Case in point. He grins and loudly sucks every last drop. Quit raiding my fridge, Lang, Tony snarks. Quit buying all the good stuff. Scott kicks his legs up onto the coffee table and turns on the TV. Stephen simply laid out on the couch again with his legs across Tony's lap and reads while the other two watch reruns of Friends. He would take the quiet while he could. It was a rare occurrence. Doctor Strange, you have an incoming call from Peter. Victor calls from his bracelet. Stephen sighs and puts the tea down to pull his phone out of his pocket. He was at school, so either he had gotten into trouble, not likely unless it was an attack on Earth kind, or he wasn't feeling well, something still unlikely because of the spider bite. What's wrong, Spiderling? The sorcerer asks when he accepts the call. Doctor Strange? That was not Peter. In fact, it sounded like... Ned, where's Peter? We're in the boys' bathroom on the second floor. I think Peter is going through a sensory overload. Shit. That was the one thing Peter truly hated. All right, I'll be there in a minute. Stephen hangs up, uses his magic to change into street clothes, and then opens a portal just around the corner of the school. With long strides, he shoves his way through pedestrians and into the school and makes a quick stop in the office. I'm here to pick up Peter Parker. The secretary looks up, blushes, and reaches the intercom phone until Stephen reaches out and stops her. Please don't, he's not feeling well, and the intercom will only make things worse. I know where he is. If I may go and get him myself? The woman quickly gathers herself. Of course, sir. I just need your name and have you sign him out. When he relays his name to her, he looks at him with a mixture of confusion and skepticism, but thankfully clears him to retrieve Peter. Stephen rushes out of the office and up the stairs, and to his relief finds him in the bathroom fairly quickly. He wrinkles his nose in disgust as he walks in, but says nothing when he spots Peter curled up in the corner with his hands in his ears. Ned looks up, and relief crosses his face as he promptly moves away from his best friend to let the doctor take his place, and gently pulls Peter's hands down. I'll get you home in just a second, Spiderling. Strange looks up at Ned and accepts Peter's backpack for him. Thank you for calling me. Ned nods. I can call him later and tell him what his homework is. I'm sure he would appreciate that. He then turns around and opens a portal. The sound of the sparks drawing a whimper from his suffering teen beside him. Stephen ignores his breaking heart as he helps Peter through. He closes the portal and leads the teen to his bed, where Peter quickly sheds everything but his boxers. Stephen assumed to get rid of his itchy clothing. Karen, overload protocol, please. In an instant, the window is covered. The light is dimmed, and Peter relaxes when the room is soundproof and nearly dark. Stephen gently lays the covers over his son. Mom, Peter croaks out. Just relax, Spider Baby. Peter nods and rolls onto his side. An explosion startles both Stephen and Happy from their nap on their respective couches, and both jump to their feet. The sorcerer punches the code, opens the lab door. He looks at the trashed, smoking lab for Peter and Tony, faintly registering that Dummy was successful taking care of any fires. He soon spots the engineer slumped up against the wall and rushes over before kneeling down to examine his injury. I've got Peter, the bodyguard yells from the other side of the room. He looks fine, just knocked out. Stephen exhales when he finds Tony in the same condition. Tony is the same. It must have been a repulsor explosion. Tony groans and opens his eyes. Peter, he'll be all right. What happened? The billionaire stands with the help with the doctor's help and rubs the back of his head. One of my gauntlets short-circuited. Happy approached them with a smirk. The kid just woke up and he's talking a mile a minute. I'm pretty sure he's fine. I'm going back upstairs to finish my nap. Tony rolls his eyes as Happy leaves the lab, and both parents walk over to find him patting Dummy. Good job putting out the fire, buddy. Now Dad won't have to donate to the community college. Don't donate you to the community college. The robot trills and praises. Now Friday is risking reprogramming, Tony says irritably. I tried to warn you, boss, but you didn't listen. Could AI be annoyed? Friday definitely sounded annoyed. That sounds like something you would do. Steven drawls and Tony throws his arm up. Traitors, I'm scraping Friday and breaking up with you. Peter looks up at Tony's declaration and watches the couple in alarm. But Steven smiles and Teen relaxes and turns his attention back to Dummy. The poor kid really feared his family going to fall apart over something as trivial, and it hurt Steven. It really showed how much Peter loved him. You won't have anyone to kiss your boo-boos then. Tony stares at Steven until he barks out a laugh that turned into something hysterical. That's true. Brucey is definitely not the time to help me with that. He finally wheezes out. Steven then decides to take it a step further. Besides, if we break up, I'm taking Peter. The boy himself pouts. Don't drag me into your marital problems. Okay, first of all, we have to be married to have marital problems. Second, he was my kid first. You guys might as well get married. You already act like a married couple. Peter grumbles at the older two, glance at each other. And there's the headache I get from dealing with you two, Steven says and rubs his temple. Steven groggily opens his eyes when cool hands find itself on his forehead, and he purrs when he finds Tony leaning over him. Something he would completely deny later because he wasn't even aware he could even make that noise. Feeling under the weather, Mama Bear? I'm fine. I'll believe that when you stop trying to hack up a lung while you're sleeping. The sorcerer bats away Tony's hands and sits up, only for his boyfriend's hand to settle on his chest and stop him from getting up. It was weird for him to fuss over him, and he also wasn't worried about getting a cold. If you put one foot on the door, I'm going to stick Peter on you. That actually got Steven's attention. Tony had gotten a sick few times before, and when Peter got wind of it, he hovered. The teen took upon himself to make sure the engineer took some medicine, fed him, and checked in on him to make sure he was resting. Steven found it hilarious and let the boy take care of Tony as long as he didn't disturb him. To be on the receiving end of that, though, that was a scary thought. He was the doctor of the family. He was supposed to be worried about them, no matter how many headaches they might cause, not the other way around. So he laid back down. That's what I thought. The only acceptable reason for you to get out of bed is for the bathroom. Asshole. I love you too, Mama Bear. Now let's take care of you. Tony kisses his forehead. I'll send Peter in with some water and pills. Steven glares up at him. You're going to let him hover anyway? Tony frowns. He already knows you're sick. He promised not to hover. Fine. After Tony left the bedroom, Steven expected Peter to stumble in a couple of minutes later. He never did. Tony was the one to bring him whatever he needed, and the doctor immediately knew something was wrong. It took him a few minutes to think about what happened, and he finally remembered Peter's enhanced hearing. The boy probably heard his parents' earlier conversation and assumed Peter didn't want to be bothered. Stephen didn't want to be bothered and decided to stay away and respect his wishes. Just the thought squeezed the sorcerer's heart painfully. Precious, wonderful Peter ignored his own insecurities so Mom could rest without disruption. Tony's cell phone ringing pulls Stephen out of his own head, and he watches as the older man looks at the screen. He grimaces in irritation before pocketing the phone and placing a glass of water on the nightstand by Stephen. Pepper needs me for something SI related. Stephen waves him away. I'll be fine. I'll have Friday. Annoy Bruce if I need to. Tony opens his mouth as if to say something, but thinks better of it and closes his mouth again. Stephen relaxes against his pillow when the billionaire leaves and allows himself to doze off with a thud. And a soft curse wakes him up later this evening. Blue eyes blink open at the disturbance, and he immediately makes contact with doe-like brown eyes, wide with horror. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. I'm only in here because Dad asked me to check up on you. You're obviously fine, so I'll go now. Yeah? Peter turns to leave, and Stephen quickly reaches out to grab his sleeve. Come here, Spiderling. I swear I wasn't hovering. Stephen smiles softly and pulls the younger onto the bed next to him. You can watch TV if you want. Just keep me company. The horror slowly eases away, and the sorcerer pulls him into a hug, and Peter quickly turns on the TV. If this wasn't enough to show his son he wasn't bothered, he didn't know what was. He really did need company, though. After living in the chaos of the tower for months, the quiet was unnerving. Stephen found that he really didn't mind.